Are you taking the digital SAT this October 5th of 2024? You are? Well, you probably want to know what's on the test, right? Luckily for you, I have made some predictions that I think have a very high probability of showing up on the test this coming month. Do you want to know what they are? I have 10 of them for you. So number one, I predict that there will be a question in one of the reading writing modules that will have a double text, and in it they'll specifically ask what one author thinks about a detail or an idea that the other author said. Here's an example of the type of question I'm talking about. So see in this text, we have actually, it's two paragraphs written by two different people. And what you're going to want to do first is you're going to want to look at the actual question stem before you start reading. That would be this part right here, where it says, based on the text, what would the author of text 2 most likely say about text 1's characterization of the discovery involving EGR? So you want to read that first, because then you know what to look for when you're actually reading the text. So that is the first thing, a paired passage where it's asking you what one author would say about a detail that the other author wrote about. So number two that I predict is going to show up on the October 5th digital SAT is a short, very old poem. So it will not be anything like what you're used to maybe reading. Maybe in English class you have read one that's old, like 16th century, 17th century, etc. But it will be an old poem, and it will specifically ask you what the main idea of this old poem is. So here's an example of what I'm talking about. So in this poem, we literally have a poem from Shakespeare written in 1609, sonnet 27, and this is an excerpt. And basically, you read the question stem first, which is this part, the main idea of the text. And this lets you know that you're trying to figure out what it's about as a whole. And it helps you so you're not rereading and rereading and rereading a gazillion times. So that is prediction number two. So the third thing that I predict is going to show up in one, if not both, of the reading writing modules is a claims question. And that's one where they're asking you for evidence or asking you about supporting or weakening a claim or a hypothesis or an opinion of the author or someone the author has written about. But it's a claims question, right, in the reading writing module. But I think they're going to ask you about what, if true, would support the author's claim. So here is an example of what that might look like. In this particular type of question, you have a text, and then it asks you something that seems a little maybe bizarro, which is like, which finding, if true, would most directly, in this case, it says support the researcher's claim. So an important thing to note, the researcher is whomever they are talking about, not necessarily the author. So sometimes it's support the author's claim, sometimes it's someone that they're specifically talking about. So you want to know what your task is. So you want to read this question stem first before you then go and read the text and figure out what in the world this person or this author believed, what is their claim, and then decide, well, what type of thing would support it or contradict or weaken it, right? So that is the third thing that I predict you will find on the October 5th digital SAT. So hi there, my name is Kristina Semos, and if we have not met before, I am the owner and founder of Ivy Lounge Test Prep, and I basically help high schoolers like you all over the globe drastically raise their SAT and ACT test scores and ultimately get into the colleges of their dreams. So now I have a question for you, and that is, have you done these type of questions we've talked about so far? The double passage text, the old poem, or supporting a claim? And what were your thoughts about them? So please write them down in the comments below. I am very curious to see what you think. And while you're at it, please like this video and even subscribe to this channel, and that way you'll always get my new videos when I post them. Now, the fourth thing I think you're going to find in one of the reading writing modules is going to be a claims question kind of like the one we did, but this time involving a two-way table filled with data, and it's going to specifically ask you to either illustrate a claim or complete a statement that is made in the text. So here's an example of what that might look like on the test. Okay, so as you can see, this particular table has years, and then it has all sorts of other interesting information in it. And again, you would probably want to read the question stem first to decide what you're going to do, right? So which choice most effectively uses data from the table to complete the statement. So then your task is basically, you need to then read the actual text here, see what it's telling you, see like what example it has made, and then your task is going to be to look in this table here and actually see which one would kind of prove that point, which one would complete the text, which would finish the example. So that would be the fourth prediction of what I think is going to be on the October 5th digital SAT. Okay, the fifth thing that I predict with all of my being is going to be on the digital SAT this October 5th is going to be a standard English convention grammar question, but that specifically asks you to know how to use a semicolon. And this shows up pretty much in every module. Well, every reading writing module, you will find one of these. So let us be clear. How to use a semicolon. There's one big way that shows up on the test. There is one lesser known way that occasionally might show up, but the one that you really need to focus on is this. You use a semicolon when you have a complete clause or sentence and another complete clause or sentence, and you use a semicolon to separate them. So it would look like complete, semicolon, the second complete sentence, period. Okay. Now there are ways you can mess this up. If you decide to use what we call a fanboys or a coordinating conjunction, like for and nor, but or yet or so, at the beginning of the second one, no, you can no longer use a semicolon because that fanboy, in essence, turned this complete into a fragment. Okay. However, and that's funny, I just said that. If you were to use a transition word, like a hard transition word, like however, additionally, moreover, one that you would normally separate with a comma, those are totally fair game to use after the semicolon. So you could do complete, semicolon, however, or additionally, comma, complete, period. That works. But complete, semicolon, fanboys complete, period, does not. Does that make sense? Okay, the sixth thing that I suspect is going to be on the digital SAT this October 5th is a median question. That doesn't sound too terrible, but I think they're going to try and trick you in some way. Okay, so we all know if you have a set of some numbers, some data, the median would be the one in the middle. So if you have like, say 7 numbers, it would be the one in the middle, it would be this one. If you have 10, an even number of things, then you take the 2 in the middle and you average those, and then that's your median. But I think they're going to try and trick you, and I think the way they're going to try and trick you is that they're not going to have the numbers in order. So don't be tricked. Like the median is the number in the middle, but when they are in order. So just do that check, make sure they're in order first before you then go looking for the value in the middle. So that is number 6, a tricky median question. So the 7th thing that I think is going to show up on the digital SAT this October 5th is going to be an exponential growth question, maybe even a tricky one. But the whole point is you are going to need to understand exponential growth and decay backwards and forwards. Like you're going to need to understand what all the parts of the equation mean because they might give you certain parts and not others, and you need to be flexible. So here is an example of an exponential growth question and what that might look like. So in this question, It says for the function q, the value of q of x decreases by 45% for every increase in the value of x by 1. So if it's increasing every year or decreasing every year by a certain percent, that is exponential growth or decay, right? So if q of 0 is 14, which equation defines q? So we have a couple things here. One is they told us a value, but by saying when q of 0 is 14. So when I plug in 0 for the x, I will get 14. That is a tricky way of telling you that the base is not 14, it's the coefficient, the number before the base that gets multiplied is 14, right? So that means we're looking at one of these two guys at the end. Because reason being, if I raise anything to the 0 power, I get 1. So that means it couldn't be this, that is, it couldn't be one of these, because if I raise this to the 0 power, 14 to the 0 power would just be 1. So my 14 would not show up there. Okay. So then the other thing is you have to think, oh, is it increasing by a certain percent or decreasing by a certain percent? So if you are decreasing by a certain percent, you're in essence multiplying by a number smaller than 1 every time. Specifically, you are multiplying by 1 minus the percent decrease written as a decimal every time. So like if I decrease by 10%, that means I'm multiplying by 0.90. If you are increasing by a certain percent every time, that means you're growing. You're multiplying by a number larger than 1 every time. So if using the same example, if I were increasing by 10%, I'd be multiplying by 1.1 every time. So then that is going to be how you're going to find the next one. So look, I'm decreasing by 45%. I'm decreasing by a lot. I need to be multiplying by 1 minus 0.45 or this 0.55. So that is an example of an exponential growth or decay problem and how you kind of need to know all parts. The 8th thing that I think is going to show up on the digital SAT this October 5th is going to be a triangle question that is a right triangle question, but they say it all in words and they don't draw it out for you, and you really have to draw it out to know what they're talking about or visualize which side is how much. And once you do that, you might be able to then use maybe Pythag theorem to figure out the other side. And I bet trig will be involved. So here is an example of what might show up. So in triangle, JKL cosine of K is 24 over 51, and angle J is the right angle. What's the value of cosine of L? So in order to even understand what's going on, I highly suggest you actually draw yourself a right triangle. And then you use this value they gave you, that cosine of angle K, like make one of these angles K, make one of them L. You know that J is this right angle. And they told you cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Just literally make the adjacent side to K, the 24 on top, literally make the hypotenuse 51. Now, that means we have two sides of our imaginary triangle. We literally can use Pythag theorem to figure out the third. Once you know the third, you could figure out cosine or sine or tangent of any angle they ask you, right? And then this won't be a problem. So that is the trig right triangle type of question I think is going to show up on this test. Okay, the 9th thing that I think is going to show up on the October 5th SAT is a linear equation question that specifically asks you about the X or Y intercepts. Okay, here is what that might look like. Okay, so this problem, the function h is defined by h of x equals 4x plus 24. Literally a linear equation. We have a slope, we have, slope x plus y intercept, right? The graph of y equals h of x in the xy plane has an x-intercept of a comma 0 and a y-intercept of 0 comma b, where a and b are constants. What's the value of a plus b? Very long-winded way of asking you that, but they also gave you information, right? And so this is what you need to remember. The x-intercept is at some constant, comma, 0. Yes, you're right. To find the x-intercept, you in fact do plug in 0 for the y in the equation, and then you'll figure out what the x value is that gives you that, right? The y-intercept, they literally told you how to find it if you didn't already know from the mx plus b format of the line. And that is, look, you make x 0, and then you will find out what the y-intercept is, right? So look, this question actually told you how to solve it kind of without telling you, but they told you. But there are other questions where it might not. So just remember, if you find the x-intercept, you make y equals 0. If you find the y-intercept, you make x equals 0, and then you have those intercepts. So that is the 9th thing that I think is going to show up on this October 5th test. Okay, the 10th type of question that I think is going to show up on the October 5th, 2024 digital SAT is a simple algebra type of question, but one that so many students miss. Want to know what it is? It is an equation with multiple variables in it, but it asks you to manipulate said equation to solve for a different variable. So this is an example. This one's actually a fairly easier example, but this is an example of this type of question. So it gives you an equation, 14j plus 5k equals m. The given equation relates the numbers j, k, and m, which equation correctly expresses k in terms of j and m. So expresses k, i.e. solve for k. This bit about in terms of j and m, that's just like, cool. When you solve for k, you might have j and m hanging out on the right side, on the other side of the equation, okay? So that's literally all it's asking you to do. So that's it. Those are the 10 question types that I'm pretty confident are going to show up on this October digital SAT. So if you want to actually know how to do the questions, and if you didn't know what the math was that I was talking about, you definitely want to check out my digital SAT courses. I've got the digital SAT reading and writing course and the ultimate digital SAT math guide. And those are self-paced courses with ebooks and videos included that teach you all the concepts and strategies you need to know to ace both sections of the test. Good luck and tell me how it goes.